أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us recognize the truth and help us follow it, and to help us recognize the falsehood and help us avoid it. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make the best of our deeds, the last ones that we do, and the best of our days, the day we shall meet Him. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Anybody knows what the topic today is? Did they announce it?
No.
Oh, they didn't announce it? It's going to be about addictions. What is addiction? How do you define addiction? What is an addiction or addictive behavior? A bad habit? More, I think a little more than a bad habit, just a bad habit. How would you define an addiction? What would be an addictive behavior? Something that you do not have control over. What else?
Or something you start with simple and then progressively you get to hook to that.
It gets into that. Sometimes, most of the time, it starts like gradually and gets into it. But there's an important component that you have not mentioned yet. What? Compulsive. It is compulsive. It's definitely compulsive. What else? Something you think you can't function without. Here's the definition actually of an addiction. It says it's a condition that results when a person ingests a substance like drug, alcohol, cocaine, whatever, or engages in an activity like gambling, like shopping, that can be pleasurable, and this is a key component of it, but it continues until it becomes actually compulsive and interferes with the ordinary functioning of a person's life. And a lot of the time, most of the time, people actually are not aware of the compulsiveness of their behavior or of the addictive nature of their behavior until, of course, the reality actually slaps them in the face, or until somebody actually tells them wakes them up to what the problem that they're going through. So an addiction is a process that is compulsive, and it is intended to actually provide a certain pleasure or a certain coping mechanism, as people sometimes think, but the compulsiveness continues and the coping mechanism is not provided, so to speak. In other words, sometimes it continues to become so compulsive that it continues even without the element of pleasure that the person initially actually seeks from it. So that's why it is something that can really destroy a person's life, destroy families, destroys everything, and the potential that the person has. But there are other kinds of addiction, and I have to clarify something, by the way, is that some addictions do require professional help. So what we're discussing here is not going to be basically a solution for all sorts of behavior. It's just something that maybe sheds some lights and maybe hopefully provide some motivation for a change. But sometimes a professional help will be needed, or like a rehab programs. So sometimes some of these programs will be needed, or like the 12-step program. If any of you is familiar with that, like the Alcoholic Anonymous, the Gambling Anonymous, Sex Addict Anonymous. So there are different programs that are meant, and it's really good programs that have some form of a sponsorship and sharing stories and then providing with help and support in order to deal or to get out of the addictive behavior. So some professional help sometimes is needed, but just to shed some lights a little bit about that. There's another kind of addiction called soft addiction. Judith Wright actually is the one that coined that term. What is a soft addiction? It is not like the big addictive behavior or processes, like a substance abuse or certain behavior. A soft addiction is a certain behavior that is repeated almost in a compulsive way that masks a deeper need. And they said that one of the qualities or one of the ways that tells you whether you have this addictive soft addiction process is that when you're engaged in it, you have some kind of a zoning out expression on your face, almost like a mechanical thing, like somebody flipping through channels on a TV without even paying attention sometimes from one to the other, almost like compulsively doing that. Or somebody that compulsively checks his Facebook account and posts things, without, and he cannot live without it, almost. So that can be some form of a soft addiction, where the person actually has that element, where the behavior has that element of compulsiveness and masking a deeper need with these superficial activities, but they're not as deep as the regular addictions. Now, when you're talking about, of course, addiction, I think the most important component or the most important step toward recovery is for the person to realize that they have a problem. That there is basically a problem. It is something that is beyond my control. I know I can control it. Well, I've been trying to control it for the last 10, 15 years, and it hasn't worked yet. That's why I have a problem. Something actually has to be done. There's a beautiful story actually mentioned by Sheikh Salman al-Oudi about an addict, as to how sometimes the wake-up call comes in different ways or in different shapes. He says there was a man that has gone basically way out, transgressing against himself, engaging into all sorts of sins, trying to provide himself with certain form of satisfaction in the process. So basically he had got so far into his sins that he felt like he lost himself. So he looks for happiness and he doesn't find it. It likes the more he looks or he seeks happiness, the further it gets away from him. So he's seeking it in the wrong place. That's really what the problem is. So he seeks it in a cup or in a pill or in a certain behavior, and he finds out that the more he tries to work toward that, the further actually happiness gets away from him. Until eventually he tries to run away from himself. It gets that bad sometimes, or run away from a family that is falling apart because of his behavior, or a wife that is devastated, or kids that are heartbroken because of his own behavior. And he goes that way until, as the Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا اللَّهُ أو إِذَا أَرَادَ اللَّهُ خَيْرًا بِعَبْدٍ عَسَّلَهُ قِيلَ وَمَا عَسَّلَهُ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ قَالَ يُوَفِّقُهُ لِعَمَلٍ صَالِحٍ قَبْلَ الْمَوْتِ. That the Prophet said that if Allah wants something good to happen to somebody, he said, عَسَّلَهُ. They said, what does that mean? He said, that the Prophet said that Allah will help him do something good before he dies. And that's really what happens. The wake-up call comes in different shapes. Sometimes it comes in an accident, in a calamity. Sometimes in a whatever, something good that happens. For this person, it happened in a dream, in the form of a dream. So this man saw a dream. He saw himself in a dream. He saw himself dangling over a well, holding two ropes, a black rope and a white rope. He's holding these two ropes and he's hanging basically or dangling over a deep well. Way underneath him in the well is fire and some scary scenes. So he's holding to these ropes, fearing that he might fall down. He looks up and he finds two mice biting into the ropes. And he feels that the rope is about to be cut and he's about to fall down, and then he wakes up. So he wakes up really terrified that something that really shook him and it had a significance to him. It's not just a dream. That's how he felt. So he decided to go to somebody to explain, to interpret that dream for him. And some sheikh interpreted that dream to him. He told him that basically these ropes are your life, the days and the nights. And the mice biting into the ropes, whatever is left, is what is left of your life. And what you have beneath you is the bad, basically, the bad end that will be meeting you if you continue that same way. So you have to change that way of life. And he felt really shaken deeply into his heart, and he decided to change for the first time, truly change. So for the first time, he stood up, he made wudu, and he prayed sincerely from his heart. And for the first time, his wife saw actually tears coming down his cheeks with honesty and sincerity. Assalamu alaikum. So for the first time, he felt that something actually, his wife felt that there's something that's really changing about him. It is not really as before. But he decided to make it a true change. In other words, he decided for that to become a true new starting point. Let's wait for them, inshallah, to finish. Come in. Come in and close the door. So if you're going to be sitting down, inshallah, go ahead and take a seat. Jazakumullah khair. So back to the story. He decided that he wants to change for the first time. He did not want the change to be superficial. In other words, he did not want that to be just like another instance of regret trying to change and then going back to what he was doing before. But this time he decided to change and truly change everything about himself. So what he decided to change his friends, to change his habits, and he felt that for the first time as a human being, he can attain actually happiness. He can attain true self-fulfillment. And he felt himself basically born from a lowly animal life into a noble, dignified human life. So he felt that the change is possible. And I think this is something really important whenever you're talking about any addictive process or any sin, is that a change is possible. You know, the new start, the chance for a new start would always be available to us. No matter how bad or how far down we go, we can always actually correct the situation. So nobody can consider themselves to be a hopeless case. So this man actually has changed, keeping in mind that he's connected to the all-forgiving, the all-merciful Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he remembers that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never give up on him. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, as in the Hadith al-Qudsi, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا عِبَادِي إنكم تخطئون بالليل والنهار وأنا أغفر الذنوب جميعا فاستغفروني أغفر لكم. That Allah says, O servants of mine, you sin during the day and during the night, and I forgive all the sins. So seek my forgiveness and I forgive you. So here, despite the fact that they're sinning during the day and during the night, Allah still called them Ya ibadi, O servants of mine. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is still calling them, or using this gentle call with the people that are sinning days and night, as the Hadith al-Qudsi says, but still Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala attribute them to Him by calling them Ya Ibadi. Also in Surah Al-Zumar, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ يَا عِبَادِي قُلْ يَا عِبَادِي قُلْ يَا عِبَادِي الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ لَا تَقْنَطُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ جَمِيعًا. Say, O my servants who have transgressed against themselves, they have committed sin after sin, do not despair, Allah can forgive all the sins. That's why, despite the fact that they were sinning, that still Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala attributes them to Him. And the problem sometimes, in the process actually of change, the old habits kick in, or the old temptations kick in. Well, let me just take that sip. Let me just take that look. Just visit that website. And that's how it starts. Until, of course, it easily spirals down the line. And keeping in mind that when you feel tempted, this is the shaitan trying to bring you back into the old ways. And the important thing to keep in mind is that when you decide to change, this is the right decision. So you decided to do the right thing. Everything else becomes obstacles. Everything else becomes obstacles. And nothing more than that. But the decision that was made was the right decision for the person to persevere. And as the Prophet ﷺ told Abu Bakr as-Siddiq to always seek the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I will never to despair or to feel that I'm beyond this istighfar, asking Allah for forgiveness. So here's Abu Bakr as-Siddiq alayhi ridwanullah, that the Prophet said his belief can outweigh the belief of the whole ummah. He asked the Prophet alayhi wasallam that, Ya Rasulullah, teach me a dua that I will say in my prayer. And the Prophet alayhi wasallam said to him, and listen to the dua, I'll translate. He says, قُلْ اللهم إني ظلمت نفسي ظلما كبيرا أو ظلما كثيرا في رواية أخرى. اللهم إني ظلمت نفسي ظلما كبيرا وإنه لا يغفر الذنوب إلا أنت فاغفر لي مغفرة من عندك وارحمني إنك أنت الغفور الرحيم. Subhanallah, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. He said to him to say, Ya Allah, I have transgressed against myself largely, greatly, and nobody forgives the sins except you. So grant me a forgiveness from yourself and a mercy from you. You are the all-forgiving, the all-merciful. Subhanallah, this dua was said by the Prophet taught Abu Bakr as-Siddiq to say it. It's a beautiful dua for all of us to say. And also the Prophet ﷺ taught Aisha عنها to say the beautiful dua in Laylat al-Qadr. What was the beautiful dua? Allahumma innaka afuun tuhibbul afwa fa'fu anni. Ya Allah, you are the all-forgiving. You love forgiveness, so forgive me. You know, Allah loves forgiveness. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can punish, and when He does punish, He will do so justly. Right? Allah will punish out of justice. Jaza'an wifaqa, as it says in Surah An-Naba. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can forgive instead of punishing. The forgiveness of Allah is more beloved to Him than His justice. This is what Ibn al-Qayyim said when he was talking about al-Raja. That Allah loves to forgive, more than He loves to be just in the context of judgment. So when you're asking Allah for forgiveness, you're asking Allah for something that is beloved to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. So again, keeping in mind that a change is possible. All of these are obstacles that can be in the way. And that's really the beginning, that a new chance is always available to me, no matter how far actually or how deep I go into the sin. But there are a few things that would help. Few things that would help in that process of basically liberating yourself from addictions, whatever that addictive process or addictive behavior is. The first thing is that if I'm looking to change, I have to bring out, or I have to take the steps that would lead to change. So I cannot expect to change by just sitting and making dua. Dua is great, is a great tool, but it's not sufficient. There has to be some process with that. You know, like Umar alayhi ridwanullah, اجعل مع دعاء العجوز شيئا من القطران. He said, what happened is that Umar visited once a tribe, and they had a sick camel that has a skin sickness, shigers or something. And he asked them, what do you normally do when your camels get sick? They said, normally we have this righteous woman, we go to her and ask her to make dua. And he said, in a way it's nice, but with the dua of the old woman, put some tar, some substance that normally kills that kind of sickness. اجعلوا مع دعاء العجوز شيئا من القطران. It is not just enough to make a dua. So if I'm looking to change, I have to take the steps that would lead to change. Everything is a cause-effect relationship. Matters of deen and matters of dunya, by the way, everything. So if I want to bring a desirable effect, I have to undertake the proper causes. Otherwise, it will not happen. So if I'm really trying to change certain things about myself, I have to put myself in an environment or take the steps that will make the change possible. I cannot befriend the same people and expect myself to live my life differently if these friends are the ones that keep drawing me into the hookah shop or the other places, or even worse, the bars and all of these things. So if I want to stay away from these places, I may have to change that circle of friends. That's why a change is a process. If I don't take the steps that will lead to change, the change will not happen. I can make dua all I can, but I have to still take the steps. So again, if I want the change, I have to take the steps that would lead to change. Another thing that's really important in the process of change to keep in mind is that a change is always a struggle. In other words, don't expect it to go smoothly and nicely. It never does. I mean, I'm sorry to tell you, to give you the bad news, but that's the way it happens. A true change is always the result of a struggle. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that in Surah Al-Ankabut, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا. This is the self-struggle. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. We will guide them into the truth. So those that struggle for the sake of Allah, they will receive the guidance. Guidance can only be the result of the struggle. That's why, especially if, again, there are the pressure of the old habits, and the compulsive behavior and all of that, then there will be a lot of struggle in the process. Expect that to happen. But think about what's waiting for you at the end of the struggle, that there will be a great, shining, glorious end. That's why, again, a change is always that of a struggle. Another important thing to keep in mind, as an important tool in the process of change, I said that earlier, is to keep the dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the dua up, With all of these steps, we don't want to go to the other extreme into saying that, don't make dua, just take the cause and effect and that's it. No, the dua is really essential, because when you're making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, first you feel that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is on your side. So you're not struggling with that by yourself, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there to support you. You're not there. And keeping in mind that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will support. The hadith al-Qudsi, when Allah says, if you take a small step toward Allah, He will take a bigger step. If you go toward Him walking, He will meet you running. So Allah will always do more than you will do, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So keeping in mind that the support of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always there. There's a verse about the divorce. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that إِن يُرِدَا إِصْلَاحًا يُوَفِّقْ اللَّهُ بَيْنَهُمَا. That if they want to bring any islah, any betterment or improvement or reconciliation, Allah will give them His tawfiq, His support. The scholars of tafsir, they said that this part of the verse is universal. Whenever anybody seeks islah, Allah will give His tawfiq. Whenever anybody seeks a betterment or an improvement or an amelioration of something, Allah will always give His support. So the support of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always there. So we keep in mind the dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And like I said earlier, the circle of friends become really important. And don't feel that you should deal with that by yourself. I mean, always trying to reach out to others, because others can always support you. You know, subhanAllah, interestingly, you find in the Quran that the singular is mentioned normally in a negative way. قُتِلَ الْإِنسَانُ مَا أَكْفَرَهُ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لِرَبِّهِ لَكَنُودٌ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ ثُمَّ رَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ. That the singular is mentioned normally in a negative way in the Quran. Man is in perdition. You know, قُتِلَ الْإِنسَانُ مَا أَكْفَرَهُ. May man be killed, he's so ungrateful. إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لِرَبِّهِ لَكَنُودٌ. Man is ungrateful to his Lord. And you'll find that the exception of the success is mentioned in the plural. إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Except those that believe. I mean, grammatically both can be correct. You can say that man is in perdition except the one who does that. But Allah mentions safety in the plural sense. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا ثُمَّ رَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Those that believe. So the plural or the positive is mentioned in the plural and not in the singular. And that's really the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are always given actually in the plural. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. You don't find يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِي آمَنَ. Unless it's something specific to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. That's why, again, being in the group is really of major importance. Another important thing in the process is to increase the secretive acts of worship as much as you can. You know, the secretive acts of worship like the qiyam, by yourself. You know, charity, by yourself, without telling anybody about it. Salatul Layl, Quran, by yourself. Do more of the secretive acts of worship. Because this will be almost like your big treasure, your small treasure that you keep building it up. It is something that would help you overcome the other difficulties and the other challenges. Especially, by the way, if you're good at something, do more of it. You know, sometimes we may be bad in certain behavior or certain addictive behavior, but I'm really good, let's say, for example, at helping somebody or helping in the masjid. Do more of that which you're good at, hoping that this would help you deal with that which you still actually have weakness in. Because as the Prophet ﷺ did say, وَأَتْبِعِ السَّيِّئَةَ الْحَسَنَةَ تَمْحُهَا. Follow the bad deed with a good deed. And also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ الْحَسَنَاتِ يُذْهِبْنَ السَّيِّئَاتِ. The good deeds erase the bad deeds. So if you're doing something bad, don't follow it with another bad thing. Or give up. I've done something bad, horrible, terrible, you know, so I stopped coming to the masjid. Or I stopped praying. Well, by doing that, I'm following something bad with another bad, right? But the Prophet ﷺ said, you follow the bad with the good, which will erase it. Even if you don't feel like it, but do that. Another important thing in the process of change to keep in mind is that a relapse is not a failure. You know, especially when it comes to addictive behavior, that sometimes we slip back into our old ways. If you do that, it doesn't mean that it's not working. No, it means I have to adjust my approach. That's what it means. Something did not work, but it doesn't mean that I failed. So a relapse does not mean a failure. It means I have to change the way I'm approaching things, and maybe I can do something better actually next time. But it's one of the things that is really important in the process is never feel that you're safe. This is it. I'm already saved. I passed. You know, with the Alcoholic Anonymous, they say that once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. What does it mean? Once you are an alcoholic, you'll always be an alcoholic, even if you're sober, which means that the danger will always be there, specifically for you. If you got rid of a certain behavior or a certain addiction, it doesn't mean that, alhamdulillah, it's gone now, it's behind me, I have to forget about it. No, you have to always watch your behavior, because you can easily slip back into it. That's why I have a friend, she's 35 years sober. She was my assistant, 35 years sober. And still she would never go to any place that serves alcohol. She's not a Muslim. She doesn't go to any place that serves alcohol. She doesn't participate in any social event where they serve even beer. Because she feels that, well, I might slip back. After 35 years. You know, and I think this is a good attitude. Never feel yourself safe, because once you feel, alhamdulillah, I'm safe, I'm beyond that, you find yourself, that's when you slip back into the sin, whatever it is. That's why the person has to always watch his behavior and never take his safety for granted. This is it. I will never go back to it. So again, but if for any reason a relapse happens, it doesn't mean it's the end, it didn't work. No, it means I have to start again and readjust my approach. The second thing is that a partial achievement is an achievement. Even if I was not able to achieve complete sobriety, for example, I stayed away from the sin for 10 days. That's 10 days of sobriety. That's a good achievement. Of course, it's good to continue that, but it's good achievement. So even if it's a partial achievement, it's a good achievement. Another important thing to keep in mind that would help is to take each day at a time. Take each day at a time. You know, sometimes if you think, well, I'm going to stay away from this for the rest of my life, it's impossible. Don't think of it this way. Just think about the day. That today, I'm going to stay away from that, whatever that is. I'm going to stay away from excessive shopping, whatever it is, or drinking, or whatever it is, or visiting certain website. Just today. I'm just going to do it today. And then tomorrow you start the same process again. So take it one day at a time. But never despair. Never despair. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't give up on us. So why do we give up ourselves on ourselves? That's why the chance for a redemption is always available. Nobody is a hopeless case. We just have to take the proper process, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide His support. I'm going to stop here for a little bit, see if anybody has any question or comment.
So how do you balance the change and the will of Allah? Qadr.
See, the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, first of all, we don't know what's in the qadr. We don't know what's written somewhere, you know, there. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ, right? So the change comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ. Allah will not bring the change until the people, they change in themselves. In other words, I start something and then Allah will bring about the change. So when we're talking about sobriety or staying away from the sin or liberation from a certain addiction, that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Allah does not give it randomly. There's a certain cause and effect. That's what I was saying. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. That those that struggle, we will give them guidance. If they change in themselves, Allah will give them the change. So the change comes from Allah. That's the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not give it random. There are certain processes that have to be followed.
I'm sorry, so what I'm trying to say is, sometimes, say, when something happens, you say, you get mad about it, or why, let's say, I will be there at 7 p.m., I didn't show up, as an example. It was a qadr for me that I cannot be there at 7 a.m. or 7 p.m. So you get.
But see, that there's a difference. We say that after the fact. But I cannot use it as a justification. In other words, I cannot, wallahi, I leave my house late, you know, I get all sorts of distractions, and after that I arrive late. Why are you late? It's the qadr of Allah. You know, no, it's not the qadr of Allah, it's my neglect. It's the fact that I did not leave on time, I did not plan actually the trip on time. And that's really what it is. So the qadr cannot be used as a justification for our actions. You know, we plan. The proper attitude toward the qadr is that we plan our best and then we accept the results. Afterward we say it's the qadr of Allah, but I cannot say ahead of time, well, if I get there late, it's going to be the qadr of Allah.
After the fact, you don't get mad about it because it's
Yes, jazakallah khair. But at the same time, I cannot just say, for example, the qadr of Allah when I know that there are certain things that I could do better for next time. So let's say, for example, okay, I got there late. There was an accident on the freeway. What can I do? I mean, that is the qadr of Allah. I cannot do anything. I was planning on being here early, but there was an accident on the freeway. You know, but for next time, maybe I should look up the traffic, you know, or have my Google map on, so in case a road closes, they will tell me what are the alternate routes. You know, we have these available to us now. So anyway, it's less excusable now. But back to the topic, yes. The things that I mentioned today?
No, you said along with the dua, we have to do like.
Yes, yes. Take the.
Just summarize like 1, 2, 3.
Yes, in other words, I'm making a dua, for example, to pass my exam. With the dua, I have to study. That's what it is. I cannot make a dua and then basically not study or anything. Yes, yes. This is, I mean,
What I'm saying is like, say, like, number 1, we have to do like an amal that comes with the dua.
yes, yes. Both of these components, both of these components. أقلها فتوكل. In other words, I do my part. I'm still supposed to do my part. I cannot just use a dua as a replacement for my duty. No, I make the dua, but I also take the steps that would bring about the change. So if I want something to happen, I want to pass my exam. I have to study for the exam. These are the steps that would lead into passing my exam, but I also make the dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I want something good to happen. Let's say, for example, I want to stay away from this specific sinning behavior. I would avoid the steps that would lead into that behavior and make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I cannot put myself in a bad environment that would push me into the sin and then make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't work this way. It does not work this way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put laws for everything. This is sunnat Allah. وَلَن تَجِدَ لِسُنَّةِ اللَّهِ تَبْدِيلًا. This is the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah created the universe and the world according to certain laws, cause and effect. If I want the desirable effect, I have to follow the proper causes. Otherwise, the effect will not happen. Not the fact that I'm a Muslim, it will be guaranteed to me. No, it's the same thing that applies to everybody. But making the dua in addition to that, because the dua is part of the causes, part of the asbab. The dua is part of the asbab. So the actual steps as well as the dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? Any other comment or question? Let's talk. Any question? Okay. A little bit about these soft addictions. What are these soft addictions? These are things that basically we do as part of our daily routine sometimes that take on a life of their own. Like I said, when a person, for example, engages into certain behavior that is not bad in itself. So we're not talking about drinking or taking certain substance or engaging in certain wrong activities. These are like normal activities, but sometimes they acquire a certain compulsive dimension in the way that we're doing them. Like, for example, a person visiting certain places on a regular basis, even when it's not needed. Like, for example, a person flipping from one channel to the other, continuously and compulsively. Like a person, for example, continuously checking their Facebook, for example, or whatever platform they prefer, and they have to post something, and they have to do something, and it becomes basically their life. It becomes really literally their life. If they they drink something, I'm gonna tweet about it. If I drink a coffee, I'm gonna tweet about it. If somebody says hello, I'm gonna have a Snapchat, or tweet about it or something. Everybody has to know. That sometimes can become actually some kind of an addictive process, where basically it becomes a person's life. It becomes a life of its own, while real life is passing by. It is. It's just like my life is mostly actually virtual, is mostly on Facebook. What about the real life? Real life is passing by, and I'm not even noticing about that. And that sometimes can be very difficult. And the problem with that is that when everybody does it, it becomes difficult to realize that there's a problem, because everybody's doing it. If a person, for example, is doing some odd behavior, it is easy to spot and to identify as addictive. Like, for example, if you're drinking alcohol in a group or among a group of Muslims. Anyway, this is easy to spot as something really odd and different and wrong. But if you're doing something that everybody's doing, it becomes difficult to spot. I'm not saying that doing Facebook is haram like alcohol, by the way. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that sometimes there is some kind of an addictive element in there. And like I said, they call it soft addiction. Not real addiction. It's not a real addiction. But sometimes it can actually take a life of its own, where it takes over a person's life. And this is really what they do. And it gives you a false sense of achievement. In other words, if I get 10 likes or 100 likes to my post or retweets or whatever it is, I feel like I have changed the whole world. It doesn't mean anything. Everybody's doing it. That's really what it is. So it becomes like deceptively actually appealing, that a person has this false sense of achievement, false sense of activism even, by the way. Even people that are involved with any activism, they feel that if I get 100 likes or like whatever, 10 or 100 shares, this is it. Alhamdulillah, I changed the whole world. This is the greatest form of da'wah. It can be an effective form of da'wah, I'm not saying that. But sometimes it is not. Sometimes it is more deceptive than anything else. And I just mentioned that. There could be any other form of these soft addictions. Like I said, sometimes shopping, or going to the mall continuously, or checking eBay, everything, or, all the time for specific items when you don't need them. And initially, maybe that would give you the happiness, but eventually the compulsiveness remains, but the happiness disappears. In other words, it becomes compulsive and it will not give you the gratification that it did initially, that you started with. It disappears. That's really what happens. And that can be sometimes, like I said, something dangerous that has to be dealt with for the person to have a fulfilled life. Anybody like to share anything on that? Yes, Nabil.
Relapses are normal, so if a person is trying to give up a bad habit of staying away from it, falls back, and during this time he happens to pass away, do we basically get credit from God for passing away?
Jazakallah khair. So if a person, let's say, again, repents and relapses, and he passes away. Some scholars consider this a great form of jihad. In other words, so long as you keep trying, this is really great. That's why you never give up. And if, let's say, for example, I repented today, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala erased my past sins, and I went back to the sin again, does that cancel my repentance? The answer is no. Whatever I have achieved is already there for me. It's saved. It's not going to go away. That's why I keep trying. And I never give up. I never despair. One thing they tell you in the 12 Steps program dealing with addiction, they will say, keep coming back. Never give up. In other words, no matter how bad you go, keep coming back. Never give up. Never despair.
So you say the failure is part of the success?
Failure can lead to success. The failure is expected, by the way, sometimes. Nobody gets it right the first time. We struggled with it. That's why the Prophet ﷺ, in the famous hadith of Mu'adh ibn Jabal and Abu Huraira, when he sent him to Yemen, he told him, اتق الله حيثما كنت وأتبع السيئة الحسنة تمحوها. He said, have taqwa of Allah wherever you go, and follow the bad deed with a good deed which will erase it. Now, why did he say, follow the bad deed with a good deed which will erase it, after he said, have taqwa of Allah wherever you go? Why did he say that? What's the connection between these two pieces of advice?
Human and sinners. Human will sin.
Because in the process, in the pursuit of taqwa, you're not expected to be perfect. There will be sometimes some mistakes. So what do you do when the mistakes happen? You follow the bad deed with the good deed which will erase it. But with that said, this is not to be taken to the other extreme, into saying, well, I'm a sinner by nature. In other words, I cannot help it, I'm going to do the haram. That's the way I'm made. No, of course not. That's a different thing in there, But at least the person has to try his best to stay away from it. If it happens, then you follow the bad deed with a good deed which will erase it. Any comment or question? If you close, everybody will bring the questions afterward. And I can tell you, most of the good questions actually come at the end, after we finish. People will come, I have a question. Yeah, it's a good question, ask it in front of everybody.
This is part of the sunnah, right? But can we go to this?
Part of the sunnah to what?
The trial and tribulation, we go through this.
Well, see, we're not angels. Humans are not angels. So we have the tendency, the good and the bad. We have the choice of being good and the bad. So we're talking about the struggle. That's what life is about. You're faced with choices that you make. So not everything is already preset and predetermined. No, we make choices. We make our choices. Yes.
I don't know if this relates to the talk today, but what do you do if you have a son or daughter that is at compulsive behavior in cleanliness or washing hands a lot, or what can you do to change that?
Wallahi, that's a good question. Now, sometimes, by the way, I'm not saying that's the case. Like in extreme cases, there are sometimes medications that would help. Yeah, in extreme obsessive compulsive behavior, there are certain medications that would help. Of course, that would have to be prescribed by a psychiatrist. And I think it's really, we need to get rid of the stigma of a psychologist or a psychiatrist. In other words, if somebody visits a psychologist, it doesn't mean he's crazy. No. I mean, there are certain sicknesses that are organic, that can be treated by medications, like severe depression, for example. You cannot say, well, just come on, snap out of it and everything will be good. It doesn't work this way. Sometimes you need medication. And it doesn't mean that the person is crazy or that he has a bad belief, by the way. Because that's what happens sometimes when you feel down, you're feeling really down and depressed, people will tell you, come on, strengthen your iman. And you end up feeling worse because now I'm depressed and I just found out that I have a bad iman, That's why I think we have to get rid of that stigma of that. But with that, sometimes compulsive behavior, certain compulsive behaviors can be a phase that some people go through, especially when they are at a younger age. Especially when it comes, like, for example, doing wudu, for example. Doing wudu over and over again, and you go after them as if it was the flood of Nuh, in the bathroom, all over the floor. And sometimes it may come as a result of, how should I say, ignorance about the deen. In other words, some people will be so afraid of doing something wrong that they will do things over and over again to ensure that things are done the proper way. I mean, I know a brother that used to spend like almost half an hour making wudu. Half an hour making wudu, I mean, can you imagine that, And imagine if he loses his wudu on the way out, oops, another half an hour, But subhanAllah, if you look at the way the Prophet ﷺ did, specifically the wudu, the Prophet used to make wudu in what's called a mud. This much. In English it's called yepsen. The amount of water you can hold when you cup your hands together. A full wudu with this much. This is what we used to wash our face once. A full wudu with that. And we used to do that, by the way. We were taught to do that. I can tell you, especially, during the war in Lebanon, when sometimes water would be very limited. So we learned how to make basically a wudu with this much water. And a perfectly valid, complete wudu. But how do you do it? Like I said, so repetition, more is not better. But sometimes people will be afraid, well, what if I missed a tiny, teeny, bitty spot in there, my wudu will not be valid. Well, if you try your best, and you miss something without paying attention, رُفِعَ عَنْ أُمَّةِ الْخَطَأُ وَالنِّسْيَانِ. Allah will not hold you accountable for that, so long as you try your best. You're not going to be able to tell every single cell whether it was covered with water or not. But sometimes, like I said, or questions about the water, and I think a good part of it is really education about what Islam says about some of these things, if it is religious in nature, by the way. But sometimes it can be actually worldly in nature, like cleaning the room over and over again. That's not easy to get rid of. Sometimes resistance they said like for the first 10 times will make it easier afterward. In other words, if you manage to resist for 10 times, it makes it easier afterward. But the person has to realize that there's a problem first. If they don't realize that there's a problem, you can't do anything about it. If they feel that this is the right, in other words, this is it, no, I don't see any problem with that, then there's very little you can do about it. But sometimes you can convince them that there is a problem by talking about it, and then even showing them what should be the case. I mean, why do you keep cleaning the room? What is it that's bothering you in there? I mean, is it a speck of dust? There will always be dust. You can remove one, there'll be 10 million instead. So in other words, what is it that you're trying to do with that? And I think listening to them, and sometimes, by the way, they suffer from it, because in a way it's hard. It's hard. And some people, they may even hate the religion because of that, if it's something related to the religion. In other words, always going back, repeating the wudu, But subhanAllah, learning about the deen, it makes it easier. Or repeating the salat, by the way. But we don't know the Prophet never ever repeated the salat. He didn't, alayhi salatu wassalam. Inshallah. Any other comment or question? Nope. Going once. This is it. You know, first of all, wallahi, more water usage is not better. The Prophet ﷺ said, do not squander, do not waste water, even if you are on the bank of a flowing river. That's what he said. So even if the water bill is included in the rent, you know, no, still. So you don't waste water. What you do is that even if you put a few droplets of water and wipe over the organ, that's considered washing, if some drops come down. You know, there's a difference between washing and wiping. Wiping is you have water, you shake your hands, and you wipe. This is wiping. But washing is you have a little bit of water in here, and you still do that covering of that. That's considered washing. So it doesn't have to be completely drenched. You know, that's good. I mean, if you have water, that's good. You know, but even that is good enough. You know, it's good enough. It's a perfectly legitimate wudu. It does not have to be completely, you know, covered with water. You know, drenched, dripping all over. Yes.
Another question, what do you do with these days, the teenagers watching YouTube videos and stuff that they're addicted to? How do you help them?
Well, you see, that's the thing. You know, if they're like younger kids, you can impose some rules, by the way, some regulations. You can impose that, for example, that only 1 hour by the computer, for example. You know, I mean, you have the authority. You're the mother. You can impose certain things that to say, for example, only 1 hour behind the computer or on your phone.
What if they reach 20?
Well, you can give them an advice. You can give them an advice, you know, and then basically try to explain to them why this is not good. There are millions and millions of videos, and there's always something interesting to watch on YouTube. And that's the problem, you know. I mean, YouTube has for every single taste. So whatever you're into, you'll find something on YouTube. And they have other channels as well, you know. That's the problem. It's like, again, like somebody has a 300 channel TV. There's always something interesting to watch. And sometimes it's better just to walk away from it. That may be the easiest thing to do. And not to feel that, well, if I don't watch this, I'm missing. No, you're not missing anything. I mean, you've already watched 1 million videos. What did you gain out of it? To think that, well, it's just this one video. If I don't watch it, I'm losing. It's the chance of a lifetime or the achievement of a lifetime. Well, I've watched many others. What did I get out of it, you know? That's why it's difficult. By the way, it's really difficult, you know, because everybody's doing it. Everybody's doing it. But you give advice. If they're like 20 already, just give an advice. Anybody found a way to deal with that, by the way? Anybody found a way to deal with that? That you can share with us? How do you deal with it? That was a question. Nobody was able to deal with it? I mean, if it's something that you're faced with, anybody else, how do you deal with it?
It's one thing dealing with it, and one thing being successful at it.
Make one thing what?
Being successful at it.
Well, yeah, but, yeah.
And it's a challenge. And I think every kid is different. And some take it, and some try their own, and they realize that really it is.
Yeah. By the way, even the grown-ups get into it, you know, it's not just the kids, you know, I mean, we all have that, you know. Khair, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, wallah, I'm sorry, just, I can hear her, wallah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I heard one scout of CrossFit said, like, don't watch it in the morning or before you go to bed, and in the morning, this time, and for Facebook or something.
Why not?
Something addicted to it, not in the morning, not in the evening. This she was like telling someone.
Well, I see, there's a problem about watching, by the way, TV or any screen at night, by the way. They said that the blue, actually, color can really mess up your circadian rhythm, your biological clock. That's why we have so many sleeping problems today. Because, you know, basically the blue color that comes out of the screen is telling the body that it's the morning. You know, that's, you know, which is the light that normally you see in the morning. When you wake up in the morning, that blue color, that's something that is actually, that comes out of the screen, our phones or the TV, you know. So that sometimes can really mess up your biological clock. And some of them actually came up with certain glasses that filters that to put it actually at night. But getting so much actually of these gadgets basically really messes up your sleep schedule. That's why, we're having more and more sleeping problems. خير إن شاء الله. جزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاكم الله خير.